Paul Fay, and welcome to another episode of GAA Youth Beyond the Pitch, a series that has been designed and produced by the GAA Youth Reps, which addresses topics of interest for young people across the GAA, LGFA and Camogie Association. Today we are joined by Fionn Fitzgerald to discuss the player pathway.
Fionn Fitzgerald has went on to captain his county to an All-Ireland title in 2014, in addition to winning 5 Munster titles and a National League title. Fionn has also had success at club level, where he plays for Dr. Crokes. So far in his club career, he has won 1 All-Ireland, 2 Munster titles, and 4 Kerry titles. And he will no doubt be hoping for more. Currently a lecturer in IT Tralee and a strength and conditioning coach, Fionn joins us on our 5th episode to chat about his playing career. He's a career as a coach and now how he is helping and previously helped players and teammates through the player pathway.
Hi Paul, how's it going? How are you keeping?
Not too bad knowing yourself. Thanks for coming on, Fionn. Just want to ask a couple of questions. So, what started you on your playing career, your player pathway? How did you get involved in football and that kind of thing?
I suppose probably like a lot of GA players really, or a lot of sports people in general. I started when I was quite young really. Fitzgerald Stadium, which would now be the main stadium in Kerry. We didn't have a club field at the time with Dr. Crokes, so there was a little small field out the front, and they'd be my earliest memories. So playing under, what is it, 6 is it, from there upwards. I would have played all sports when I was younger, but from a GA perspective and football perspective in particular, football and hurling. It was hurling for the first hour, I think, and football for the second hour. So got a taste of both. But my first love was always football anyway, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. What do you think the key stages that stood out for you between the age grades? So what helped you from moving along through the ages, say under 12, under 13, under 14, under 16? What are the key stages that you can outline?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of ones that stand out in my mind. And looking back on it, and even from kind of studying the area of sports science now and all, it probably makes a little bit of sense. I would have said the 14, about 14 years of age was kind of a big enough jump. Maybe under 10, 12, all that kind of side of it, so when you get a little taste of competitive football at the start. But under 14, I felt that there was a little bit more competitiveness involved then. Players tended to become an awful lot physically bigger, stronger. The type of football you were also playing in senior goals. So I was quite a small player. I remember playing at the start and say cornerback, wingback, and even from a defensive point of view, trying to stop forwards, the goal, unless you had a very big goalkeeper, it was a major jump to go into this kind of senior status there. And I suppose then the next jump I would have thought of really would have been from under 16 to minor. I would have felt that was when it was really getting in towards almost senior grade really as such. And once again at 16, I would have said I was relatively small. I remember playing under 16 and minor, and I suppose I would have had to play a different type of game maybe to get around my lack of physicality, if you want to put it like that. And I'd say a lot of players would probably relate to that. Whereas then we'll say under 18 to senior, then that's after minor. Between minor and senior is the big jump. That probably takes a couple of years. Took me a few years to transition there. So they're the kind of ones that stood out to me. We'll say around under 14, maybe between 16 and 18, and then that last one is the minor to senior, which is unfortunately where a lot of people probably fall down a lot of the time. But they were the key junctions for me anyway, I would say.
Yeah. So what would the jump from club to county be like? When did you start to progress into the county stages, or was that senior level you moved in, or what? How was that trend?
So I played a little bit. So we'll say there was an under 14 Kerry South is divided into 2 counties, or 2 halves rather. Kerry South and Kerry North. So that was the start of it. Got a flavour under 14, under 16, and then I played minor. But I made all those teams, but I wasn't like a superstar, and I was just about making those teams, I would say, really. At that age, and because basically I suppose physically I probably wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been a huge attribute in my game, whereas I was probably relying a little bit more on my speed and my skill and maybe other aspects of my game. So they were the teams I would have made, and then I struggled a little bit with form between minor and under 21 then, and that was basically also had a lot of hamstring injuries for a couple of years there, so I didn't really get a clean run at it between playing with my club, our county then and then. I went away for time around 21, I think. I had a placement for college, and I spent a good bit of time building my body back up. And when I came back, then I got back involved with Crokes, and we were going well at the time. And then I got called in with Kerry, so that was about 21 or 2. Then that was basically with Kerry then until a year or two ago. Then.
Yeah, can you give any advice to younger players listening in? Any key transitions that helped you, or anything you know from younger players from talking to them, or what can you give advice to young people listening in now?
Yeah, I would say, look, it's easy to look back now and to give advice, but the main, I suppose, part of advice I will give is that, like, everyone thinks every game and every training is important, and I'm still like that as now more so than ever. But like when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, like it might be hard to think of it at the time, but you're really only developing and building to where you want to be maybe when you're at senior level. So like winning and losing a game or a final, the most important thing at that level, at that stage, is that you're developing, you're progressing. If you lose, maybe you're looking at how you would have lost, how you can maybe develop. If you win, then like a lot of teams and players I would have played with that would have had an awful lot of success underage. It didn't really transfer. So basically, I suppose psychologically, it can make you a little bit softer, or also can, what would I say, maybe your work ethic may be affected a little bit further. So there's definitely merit in understanding that maybe when you get to say minor level or even after that's when you really want to be continuously involved and participating from there on, like, because that's when a lot of the long-term satisfaction becomes. So basically, I suppose what I'm saying is you don't want to be jacking it all in at 15 or 16 years of age and saying, if I only did this or if I only did that. You try and stay in the game as long as you can, and that may mean for many people for many years that you don't see success, or you don't see progress or whatever. But like, it has a funny way of always maybe turning out fairly well for you if you hang in there. Like, that'll be the big message. The other one, I suppose, then would be, just from my perspective, would be that, like, the physical attributes can be very, very variable at underage level. So between 10 and 17 or 18, you could have some guy at 12 who's really, really big and strong and developed, and someone who maybe isn't. And for both, I would say the most important thing is that you're working on your skills. You're working on the basic skills, whether it's your skills in a football or hurling perspective or whatever sport, or whether it's actually your physical skills, because they're the things that are going to be most important to you later in life or later in your sporting career. And if you don't work on them in those kind of key years, I suppose, it's going to be an awful lot harder to learn new skills or new tricks when you're a little bit older, like, so basically just stick with it, and try and learn from maybe any of the losses or setbacks you get, because most people will get plenty, and kind of embrace them and think them as being maybe something to make you a bit better and stronger along the way.
Yeah, you talked about developing, and you had a couple of hamstrings injuries yourself. Would you give advice to young players start maybe doing body weight exercises, so squats, lunges? Would you recommend doing that at a young age, say 13, 14, to help them? Or?
Yeah, I would indeed. Yeah, like any of the basics, I would say, like, my advice in any S&C kind of way really would be, just, first of all, the most important thing in any part of this is the actual skills of your basic football skills or hurling skills, but having good moving patterns and basically being sturdy and strong and helping to develop that when you're 12, 13, 14, 15 is extremely important too, because that'll help you get through your growth spurt. It'll help you physically develop so that when you get to, as I said, maybe minor level or a little bit older than that you have a nice solid base built, and that you're ready to progress and fulfill your potential, really, I suppose. So yeah, any of the body weight exercises, any of the basics, your lunges, your squats, any of those ones are really, really effective. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Now, do you have any valuable memories from your coaches? Any tips they gave you growing up, to keep you going, or any exercise? What would be your memories of it?
The two things that would probably stand out for me at club level in particular, because that's where I probably give most credit to my coaches, in that it was at club level all the way up that they spend most time with me and on me, and all this. And the two main things I would have taken up from playing with Crokes underage would have been number one, kind of never giving up, and it would have been a huge thing. We would have lost so much underage, and always been, but we never gave up in games whether we were down by 20 points or 5 points or whatever. So that kind of a work ethic where you never give up, I think it's important, because basically it can be easy to throw in the towel sometimes. So that aspect, it normally has a way of working its way into your character down the line, and it builds a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of resolve and a little bit of maybe thickness, which is what you might need. And the second one then is just your ball skills, your decision making on the ball, your understanding of minding the ball, of using the ball well, just basically your all around skills of having the ball. That's the most important thing in whether it's hurling or football. Yeah, you can look at loads of other aspects of play, but I do think sometimes that we maybe forget them as young fellas and as coaches, that like getting really good at that is the aim of the game. And normally when you go up along the ranks, that's really what will separate most of the players at the end of the day at the high level. So I would say the two things for me there, as I said, was work ethic kind of and not giving up, and then just being really comfortable and enjoying the ball aspect of it.
Yeah, earlier on you talked about playing for a number of different teams growing up, so you would play hurling and football. We know nowadays it's a big thing in young people. They'll play soccer, hurling, football, rugby. What advice would you give to players how to balance it out? Looking after their bodies, especially young players when they want to develop. How can they recover? How are they supposed to manage their time and stuff? What advice can you give?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's probably an age-old problem. It was there when I was playing. It's there now, and someone could say, is it worse now or worse then? I don't really know. But long story short, if you're good and you're playing and you're interested in many sports, which I would highly encourage and hope that most people would be, it takes a little bit of I suppose thought really into how you structure your week. Really, it's not possible. Well, it is possible, but it doesn't normally end up too well in the long run. Imagining you can do all your trainings and all your games for different sports and so on. So I suppose at different stages you have to prioritize maybe at different parts of the season. Let's say football is more important, or soccer, or a certain team in football. Obviously coaches and a lot of the players maybe that I'm talking to today are not going to necessarily, maybe they might be quite young and might be difficult to talk to your coaches, but by and large, like you're trying to get a little bit of understanding from coaches to explain that you don't need to train 20 times during the week to make you better. That's not necessarily the way to go. It's getting good training in, and getting a nice balance between training and games is probably the most effective thing. So I suppose basically what I'm saying is trying to talk to your different coaches if you can, and then you'll also know your own body as well. You should get to know your own body as you get older, from 11, 12, 13, 14 onwards. You'll understand when your body feels tired, feels sore, which is all normal part of training. But if it's kind of lingering and going on a little bit longer and so on, you probably need to look at maybe your training schedule and all that. But I highly encourage to do various to be involved in various teams, but just to have a good handle on the number of trainings and games, I suppose, and all that,
Yeah, there are a number of challenges facing young people nowadays, coming up through their own pathways. What would you say is the biggest or one of the most challenging things coming up through your sporting career nowadays?
Not really sure. It's kind of it's a good question, but it's a tricky question. What are the biggest challenges? I don't know. Is the honest, this is straight up answer. I actually don't know the way can I answer that straight up. Like I suppose there might be a little bit of pressure, I suppose, from a social media perspective, and comparing an awful lot. That kind of copycat culture might exist a little bit more than it would have when I was playing. I would have said that the pathway when I was playing was probably a little bit more straightforward. There's probably an awful lot more going on now than would have been maybe say 15 years ago when I was that age, kind of developing along the way. I don't know, is that answering the question well enough for you? But
no, you're fine. You're fine. The new pathway coming out, do you think it caters for all players? Some, a few. What do you think it's going to work? What kind of ways are going to work out?
Yeah, the new pathway that was developed there was it last year. It's an interesting one. Like I suppose one of the main things that I would highly, or sorry, that I strongly agree with is the idea of the club being at the forefront or the center of it, and also kind of an emphasis on the school. So like there's still only a very, very small amount of players that will make it to the top level. And I think it's important that like most players and coaches understand that by excelling and putting a lot of time and effort in with your club, it invariably will lead to hopefully success there or enjoyment, participation. But anyone who does get to go and do well afterwards, a lot of it will stem from that aspect there. So does it allow something for everyone? I think it does allow something for everyone, but it still only allows a certain amount of people to get to the elite or the top level, and that's never going to change, and it shouldn't change, because then we'd need way more teams and all that kind of side of it. So I do think it there is a place for everyone, but I do think the likes of, say, your development squads and your teams along the way, it has to be very much a real fluid kind of an environment where players come and go, and that it's not a matter of getting in under 14 and you're in and away you go from there, because players just develop at totally different levels and stages, and like it's impossible to predict whether a player at 13 is going to be a brilliant player at 18 or 20 or whatever it is. So that goes back to my point at the start, is to kind of hang in there for every player to try and hang in there in any, whatever capacity or whatever level they're at for as long as they can, because normally around 18, 19, 20, if you're still involved, it'll start to level out a little bit, and everyone should have a fair chance then,
Yeah, I think the only player really I can think of now is Brian Fenton, not playing underage for Dublin.
Example. Like, I mean, if he, I think he was swimming. He was involved when he was younger, from what I believe. Like if he went off and went swimming, I mean, look at you could argue he's probably the most important player, our best player in Ireland over the last 5 or 6 years. But he probably had a range of skills, did different things, hung in there in the long run. Obviously showed quite a bit of resilience and resolve, and they're the kind of players really that ultimately will probably do best in the long run if you can hang in like that. A lot of the players that are maybe superstars underage, it can be harder. There's a lot of pressure involved, and there's an awful lot of expectation involved. So it's trying to manage all that can be difficult as well.
Yeah, is there still too much focus on competition and winning in your opinion, or how could players and coaches or parents affect this? Or
I think
what do you
so.
think about
I think
that?
there is. I think there is a huge. I completely agree on that. Yeah, I would say that there is a huge amount of emphasis on competition, because like we're all competitive by nature. If you're playing a game of darts or you're playing snooker or whatever, and young people, boys and girls, it's only natural and normal for them. So I don't think it's boys and girls that have an issue with the competitiveness. It's actually coaches and adults. I think it's normal and natural to have competition there, and competition should be there even from a young enough age. Little bits of competition is good, because that drives. You need to learn how to win and lose and disappointment, and it can't all just be no competition. But I think that one of the biggest issues there is from coaches and adults and parents inside that side of the house, where the competitiveness, and sometimes coaches probably need to just step back and realize what am I trying to do here? Am I trying to win an under 14 I don't know, inter-county competition or club competition, or am I trying to develop players? And like that probably should be the biggest barometer for a coach at the end of the year. But I suppose most of us a lot of the time think of success and think of how that goes, and it's a next rung on the ladder as regards progressing and all that, and it's probably one of the Achilles heel really of maybe developing players. So I'd agree with you. I think that's a very, very valid statement.
Yeah, not many players can say they're captain or counted to an All-Ireland title. How did you help younger players in that squad back through the years, or even before you were captain? How would you help younger players transition into the squad, or was there certain players in the dressing room that would work with the young players?
Yeah.
Or
I'm not sure, was I helping them or were they helping me, and that's God's honest, because when I first was captain, like I suppose I was in a team where you had all your generational players, your Gucci, your Declan Sullivans, the O'Sheas, all them, like they were all there. So I suppose ultimately I would say when I was captain originally, when we won the All Ireland, that was almost just landed on my lap, to be straight out about it. With a couple of lads in our club were injured, and it made its way down to me, and it was great, and it was brilliant, and I learned a lot from it. But I wouldn't have thought a huge amount then. Towards the latter stage of my career, I was captain, and I was actually the other way around. I was struggling to get on the team, But no, the young guys are great. I don't really think a lot of them need a huge amount of words at times and so on. A lot of them are very intelligent guys, and they just learn as they go. A lot of them have been there before, and they've had success in their own ways. But of course, you always talk to players, and you try and help them in any way you can. But nothing radical or nothing inspirational. I would say really, like, you know, the biggest thing you learn off people, and it's no more than those guys I spoke about when I first came in, is you just learn by watching them, really. You know, you of course you listen as well, but you learn by watching. So actions is probably the strongest one, really. You know.
Yeah, you talked about playing with the likes of Huge, Conor Cooper, and Shays. Did you learn a lot from them, or did you learn were they helping
of
you?
course, yeah. Just learn loads, absolutely, and stuff I've learned then that I'm still trying. It just doesn't work, but that was brilliant, yeah. And just the way, it wasn't just about what they did, you know, on the field. It's how they carried themselves, how they thought about the game, how they prepared for the game, how they dealt with trouble, how they dealt with losing, you know, all those different kind of things. So there's just so much. Look, playing at elite level, like, there's just an awful lot to it, and I think you just learn from loads of different people. But you can also learn a lot from people who maybe wouldn't be as high profile, who work just as hard and do a huge amount for the team. Like the big thing I suppose I enjoyed, and I've learned even from lockdown, exercise, sport wise and all, is that I love being in a team environment, and that's where I found it to be most enjoyable. And that's basically the area that I would have enjoyed most and excelled, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, obviously we talked about you captaining Kerry. In the moment, did you think about it much, or is it only after lifting Sam Maguire that you feel, oh, because obviously football is a big passion in Kerry, we know that, obviously, you've loads All Ireland's won. But is it a thing only after you've done it you kind of realise what it was, or in the moment did you know it was a proud? Well, obviously it was a proud moment, but did you think about it?
It's a good question. At the time, I would have had an idea, and of course I was extremely, you know, honoured and proud and all that. We'd say Kieran O'Leary, you know, was captain at the time. He was the main captain, I would say. Like, he would have done an awful lot of the captaincy work and so on. And he, like, in my eyes, it was his role, so I just kind of fell in under him, to be straight out about it. Looking back on it, it was a great time. It was brilliant for both of us. It was a lovely honour. The only thing I would say is that sometimes I think a lot can be made of what a captain does, and also what like the significance of even like lifting the cup. It's incredible or unbelievable. But sure, everyone else got to lift it as well after that. So it's not. I don't think it's something that. Sometimes I think people have a fascination with the idea of a captain and all that goes with it, and I just think that like, to me, the most enjoyable part of any of it was playing. You know what I mean? And it's not something, as I said, I take for granted in any way at all. But the playing aspect was brilliant, and anything like the captaincy and all that came with it was a bonus, and something that'd be nice, obviously, to look back on and as you go along, like, yeah.
Yeah, you previously mentioned lecturing David Clifford in his studies in IT3. What advice, if any, did you share with him, or did he take it on board? We know he was captain of Kerry. Well, did you share any advice with him going up through the ranks, or?
I don't think David needs too much advice now, to be honest about it. I think we can all really get a bit of advice that in. No, there's loads of lads that I played with and still play with, and all that I would have taught in the last few years, and it was a bit strange at the start, I suppose, and it just became normal after a while. That's just my job for the last 5 or 6 years. No, he's a great guy. He's brilliant. Like, he's very young. He's 21 or 22, and he's achieved a huge amount so far. But he carries himself very well, and like, I would imagine, like, most of his talking is done on the field, really. So he doesn't need a huge amount of advice from me or from anyone else, I'd say, really, to be honest. He's better off just to keep doing what he's doing, I'd say.
Yeah. My next question kind of rolls into this. In your current role now, obviously strength and conditioning, your thing now, how do you assist players? What's your
Yeah, so I suppose I've done a little bit more coaching over the last while. It was very hard to do a lot of it when I was playing, just time-wise, and trying to balance that and work and all that. So I've done a little bit more in the last couple of years. I was involved with the under-20s this year, and I enjoyed it. Like the question again, sorry, in what kind of way?
Just how in your current role, how can you assist players? So what
Yeah,
way
how
do
can
you?
the system? I suppose. Like a lot of them would have came from nice structured programs from development squads or school level and whatever. And most guys have a very good basic understanding of kind of S&C now and maybe the usefulness or importance of it. But it's just to try and get to know them first of all, and then figure out where they may need help. They may need a little bit of work on, but getting them really good at the basics. You know what I mean? And that goes for senior players as well. But being really, really good at the basics, same as playing football, being very, very good at all the basic skills will help you a lot. So it's nothing too fancy or anything like that. S&C sometimes can be complicated and made sound very highfalutin and all that. But being really, really good at the basics of all your movements and strong in your basic lifts and building up their basics as regards field play, like so your speed and your change of direction, your endurance and all that kind of stuff. So you're slowly building on a lot of the bits, the building blocks there that they'll need as they become senior players and all that. But I enjoy it. I think I like working with younger players, developing players, because you can see them progress, and you can also see a little bit. You can almost cast your own mind back to, say, whatever 10 or 12 years ago when you were in that position, and you kind of realize maybe the vulnerability of you or the weaknesses you would have had, or another way of looking at it is, would you have done anything differently if it was 10, 12 years ago? And there would be things you do differently. So it's just you can impart any of that onto them,
Yeah, one thing I think of now is like say Galway, Kerry, Limerick, Dublin. They're all becoming big, strong teams physically on the field. Especially the Limerick hurlers this year, we're noticing big, strong men.
Yeah,
And the weaker teams or the weaker counties, the weaker clubs, can they take stuff on board from the like becoming big, strong men to help them?
They can indeed, absolutely. Like the Limerick there is a great example. Hurlers, like, they're in great nick at the moment, and you can see them kind of building years and developing. But other counties and other clubs and other teams can learn from them. But I'll go back to this, and I will say that, like, the S&C and the physical aspect is great. It's the jam on top. It's what helps a lot. But if you don't have the basic skills, like, of the game and the basic understanding of the game, whether it's football or hurling or camogie or ladies football or whatever it is, like, you can't just put S&C on top of players that don't have a lot of the other basics, if that makes sense. So my message probably will be that, like, is to be, even when things are going bad over the years, if it's a weaker county where they're losing to maybe a stronger county and so on and so forth, like, having a little bit of foresight to try and continue to stay in the game and develop and so on, normally will work out really well as you progress up along, because most counties can get to the same physical shape, really. That's the reality of it. Like, if the same resources are invested, most counties should be able to get roughly to the same physical level, whereas it's the other aspects then that will show up and win out. Like, okay, so that's probably the one thing I would say. It's not as simple as just putting the S&C hat on and applying it across every county. It's the other basics that probably take years and years to develop, going back to the club already, club coaches and all that. That's where you develop and learn a lot of them, and then you can scale up the S&C later in life, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, continuing on talking about S&C now, do you think it fits into the new player, or what part of the player pathway does it fit into?
I do. I think it fits in very well, and I think it could and should be integrated in well, because basically, like, the best way to describe it is, some players are very skillful, skill orientated, who'd have no interest or no major application to the likes of S&C, and they'd have a huge what's the word I'm looking for? They have a lot to gain from getting involved in S&C and building a little bit of S&C, because then they have already they have the basics, the hard part. The other side of it then is people who go at a younger level or younger age go full on into the S&C and neglect or don't work on the basics, the normal skills of the game and so on, the gameplay and all that. And as a result, you know, when they get to a certain stage, they're lacking in the main skills, which is going to, you know, come a crapper at a higher level. So it's trying to get the balance right between both. So going back to your question, S&C is extremely important, but it can become too important for some players, and they over S&C it, if you want to call it like that, and they forget about the basic skills. And the other side of it is there can be players who are just involved in the skill side of it, and just it's all about the game, the skill, and all. And as a result, you know, they're probably losing out a little bit on athletic development. So if you're a very skillful player and you realize that, I don't know, you didn't move particularly well, or that you were slow or whatever like that, and you weren't, and you realize that you could have worked a good bit on that over a space of a few years, and you had a lot of the skills and you got to a certain stage and you're finding it hard athletically, hadn't done a bit more over the years. And the same with someone else, if you realize that you got really fit and you were the fastest and strongest all day up, you couldn't kick the ball over the bar, or you couldn't whatever it is, then, you know, it's getting the balance right between everything. But there's 100% a role for S&C, and it should be kind of integrated into your training, your games, your own structure, really, your week, like, you know.
Yeah, just final questions now. Just obviously, this is a podcast for younger players, and you talked about you love to help younger players develop because you can see their progress. What advice would you give to them on S&C for their pre-season and mid-season training?
When you're young, I wouldn't differentiate drastically. Like, in other words, the type of training that goes on. So, like, in a not to get kind of sciencey in it, but in an ideal circumstance, you're kind of periodizing, you're changing up a little bit, and you're planning for different parts of the season. But my basic message for in an S&C perspective for younger people would be get really, really good at the basics. Get really good at the basics. So, like, be well able to do a very good squat, a lunge, all your different push-up versions, your rows, your pulls, any of the basic exercise, your core exercises. Be really good at all of them. Be able to do them very, very well. Do them in different positions, with different resistances, maybe, like doing them in good range. So, like, squat and make sure that you have good mobility when you're doing it and all that. So be really good at all of them, and you can layer up and you can get a bit fancier as you go up along. So anyone who's involved in more structured S&C or structured conditioning program, like, coaches will help you there. A good coach will help you to, you know, make it a bit harder, change it up a small little bit. But getting really good, I remember back when I was young fella myself, when I was 12, 13, 14, my mother was a PE teacher, and I would have just done, you know, your basic press ups, your planks, your side planks, your squats, your lunges, all the same things, you know, that you'd be nearly saying to someone to do right now. Okay, and they're a nice good foundation. And once you've that foundation, you come back to me then if you want.
Yeah, I want to know personally, is flexibility underrated in S&C and playing football? Any sport really, is flexibility underrated? Do you think players prioritize strength more than flexibility?
Possibly. I'd have another way of looking at flexibility too, like static stretching, like, so just sitting down and using a rope or a band, or, you know, that type of normal stretching. Probably it can have a role. It can be useful, but I would say a lot of your flexibility here can come through doing your exercises through range. So, for example, if you're doing your squat and you're only squatting, I don't know, halfway down, like, you're far better off, and it'll be as possibly as effective in certain ways if you get sitting your bum right back down and getting used to really getting down, getting low. That's going to be as useful, as good for any maybe hip mobility as I don't know, kneeling and doing a hip mobility stretch or whatever. So it's important for sure, but I don't think it's just as simple as, like, just to go home and sit down and do 15 minutes of stretching. I think it works better, and players enjoy it more, and I enjoy it more when it's done as an exercise and you're working maybe on strength and mobility, or strength and flexibility. So you're kind of killing two birds with the one stone. So that's the way I look at it. So important for sure, but don't think it always has to be done completely on its own. That would be my thinking in it.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Love, brilliant answers all throughout. Now, I don't know if you've seen any of the other podcasts the last couple of weeks, but at the end, we like to do 6 quick-fire questions.
Okay.
So, let's start off quick-fire questions now. What is your match day essential?
My match day essential. Depends where I am, what I'm doing. Do you know, funny, when I used to I'd like to try and keep things normal as I can. I used to like reading the paper. I'd read the paper most days, newspaper, and not necessarily sport, just the newspaper in general. Even if I was in Crow Park and we were staying wherever, we used to stay in Dunboyne a bit now. I used to love getting the newspaper, come back after breakfast, reading the newspaper. I may read the sport or I may not. It's not that I was going reading what someone said about Kerry or anything. Just I used to like reading the news and so on. So that was one. That'll be probably something that, and I'd still do it even if I would have a club game at home. You know, I might head off to the shop and get the paper and read it, sit back, and yeah, that'll be one.
Brilliant. What is your go-to pre-match song?
Pre-match song. Do you know, I haven't listened to music going to games in a good while. I used to listen to a little bit of bigger games. Sometimes I used to love the Guard Escort coming into different places, different grounds and big crowds and all that. One of the ones I used to listen to good, but I loved actually was Killers and Read My Mind. That was one I used to like.
Good choice. What's your favorite GA ground?
Favorite GA ground? Well, I suppose Crow Park is the place. That's the mecca that's our mecca really in GA terms, and it's brilliant, fantastic place, particularly on like full house day and so on. Fitzgerald Stadium, then I suppose secondary. I love Fitzgerald Stadium. That'd be particularly in the summertime, and obviously a good crowd. It's a beautiful pitch, looking in the mountains. Obviously the other one, I suppose everyone would have an affiliation is their home pitch, their club field, and that would be Lewis Road at Crokes, which is just across the road from Fitzgerald Stadium. But I suppose Crow Park is the ultimate, really. Like, you know, there's loads of other county grounds I love playing in over the years. I love the smaller grounds, the tidy ones, but Crow Park is Crow Park.
That's the league. What's your happiest sporting memory?
Happiest sporting memory? I would say winning the All Ireland Club a couple of years ago. Yeah, that was huge. That was brilliant. Yeah, obviously winning the All Ireland with Kerry and captaining all was fantastic, but the All Ireland Club was something special in that we kind of tried a lot. And the way I described to someone about winning the All Ireland Club was that, like, winning an All Ireland senior with your county is huge, but you still have a 1 in 32 chance. Whereas winning an All Ireland club at senior means you're top of the pile out of, I don't know, is there 2,000 clubs in the country, whatever it is. So like it's a huge achievement, and we failed. Like we went at it a good few years, and we just didn't get over the line. Like, so, it was huge. That was massive, yeah. And just all your friends and family and everything like that. So that was one of the ones that I'll always cherish, that one, yeah.
Well, you know, Kerry probably have a lot of these, but who could you say is your childhood hero?
Childhood hero, Seamus Moynihan. I'm not sure. Would you know Seamus Moynihan? He's probably retired now, about maybe 15 years. I would have played a little bit against him at the end of his club career, but he was a guy we always looked up to. Well, I always looked up to him. He was a back, probably a little bit underrated maybe, in that when you look at the current Kerry players, and I suppose that would be household names. Seamus Moynihan would be, but I still think he should be known a little bit better. He just had everything. He had all the skills. He was an incredible leader. He was also from East Kerry, so from Glenflesk out the road, and he was involved with the SEM, which is a school we all played with, and a lot of us played with. So there would have been kind of a bit of a connection there, we'll say, in a way. Like, but I just loved everything about the way he played, and even the way he carried it. He was a great leader and a great role model for sure.
Yeah. Last one now. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Jeez, I don't know. I don't know. I actually don't even have an answer. What is my biggest pet? At the moment, probably COVID. Anything to do with COVID.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get on with life.
Yeah.
Even though we made peace with it at this stage now, we just go with the flow. But I will say anything. Actually, all the rigmarole that goes with COVID. So we have to follow all the guidelines and all that. But it just makes doing anything normal very difficult. So I'm gonna put COVID as my pet hate at the moment. So.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks, Fionn.
No problem.
Stay tuned for next week's episode, which will also be the last of the series of GAA Youth Beyond the Pitch.